Harold Hillman, always a pleasure to have you in the studio.
Thank you, Roman. It's a pleasure to be here.
Harold Hillman, by the way, if you don't know, he has got the sexiest voice on radio, and he's also an executive coach. What have you been up to this week?
It's been a really good week. I have been striving for a little bit more balance.
Oh.
At the age of, in my 60s, I think that I should be a bit more compassionate with myself. I've had the great misfortune of losing 3 friends over the last 2 years. 2 in their 50s and 1 in their 60s, all in the U.S. And it really has put me into a reflective mode around being able to create more space to live. There is a mentality in the States of work until you retire and then you live. And my 3 friends who have passed over the last 2 years, they never lived. They were working to live.
Yep.
And we're not promised tomorrow. So
you're so right.
Yeah. And so it is one of these things where I have used their experiences to translate into me kicking it into a higher gear around balance. And so I'm trying to create more space for friends, more space for music.
Oh, yeah.
Music, less space for news.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Yeah. Trump news. Let's not go into that.
Let's not go into that.
Hey, John Banks always used to say too many people die in their sleep. That's why he would never slow down. He worked himself like a little fox terrier. Too many people do wake up dead and realise that they've missed out on a whole lot of living.
That's right.
One of my good friends that you work with, Claire.
Yes.
She's trying to extol the virtues of what you're saying as well in her job as a manager. How do you change these habits that you just have been doing for so long?
Look, you push into it hard. I love Claire, so I'm glad you mentioned her. She's a superb leader who works for Dominion Breweries. And your statement reminds me of Bronnie Ware's book. She's a palliative care nurse who wrote a book a few years back called The Top 5 Regrets of the Dying. And in that book, she highlights the interviews and the themes that came from the interviews of people who were on their dying beds. And most of the men, particularly in that generation where she was focused on, and all of them, a prevalent theme was, I wish I had allowed myself to live a happier life. Yeah. Not so focused on work, people realizing at the end of their lives that they don't need as much money as they thought they would. And that this whole lifetime of sort of building up, reserves to live off in retirement sometimes doesn't come to play.
Yeah, you forget to use it and just to live.
To live.
I disappeared over to the Gold Coast earlier this week, that soulless bottom hole of a place. I'm sorry, but it really is. And I thought, what, I could just send my daughter a card and phone her, but I thought, no, get on that plane.
That's right.
Because I never take time off.
Yeah. I am I have made it, I've made it abundantly clear to my friends here in New Zealand and in the States, people who have, who I have made less of priority than work, that it's time to just sort of push more into that relationship space, because that's where living is, that's where life is, isn't it?
It is, but if you haven't retired and you're still working for, I don't know, Dominion Breweries, Media Works, whoever, and you have that management level above you, still pushing and demanding, you can't very well say, I'm only doing emails on a Wednesday.
That's right.
Can you?
Well, you can. A good friend of mine who lives in Minneapolis always says, you treat people how to respect you. And even in a relationship with your manager, in terms of things that really intrude into your productivity, it is important in terms of emails that come at you at all hours of the night. Sometimes the expectation that you will reply. If you reply, you then reinforce that behavior. There's just one example of how we've got to get smarter about how to be more productive in the workplace in 2019. Open space prevails now.
Oh, it's horrible.
I've
No, it's horrible. Who was the idiot who thought of open plan workspaces?
Look, so I started my own business in 2007, so I was never subjected to the open space environment in a major sense. It has started to creep in, but now it's prevalent, whereas, 15 years ago, we were still on the cusp of it. I did some research on this a few years back in writing an article on open space, and there's a sense that perhaps we went from one extreme where everybody had offices, and particularly the executive team was often secluded on a floor of their own, all with their own offices, so it was hard to access them. This whole notion of collaboration and breaking down silos was very hard when everybody was ensconced in their own offices. Now here we are, 15 years later, and some believe that I read some interesting articles the other day on open space, and now particularly putting the science under it of neurology, and the fact that there are a significant number of people sitting in open space work environments who are overly stimulated.
Oh.
Introverts in particular. Susan Cain is an author who wrote The Power of Introverts in a World That Can't Stop Talking. And she made the case that roughly 54% of the people sitting in open space are struggling to stay focused because their brains, introverts, are naturally more insular. They move inward. They have to spend a certain amount of time. I'm an introvert. And so, that notion of needing to spend a bit more time inward, reflecting, which is hard to do when there's just noise and things coming at you all around you.
I'm not an introvert. I think the technical word for someone like me is, hang on, let me just think about it. It's nosy. So I'm sitting in an open plan office going, oh, so-and-so's, I can hear that conversation. They're having a domestic about dinner. Or someone's walking and talking about their hemorrhoids. I can't. How do you not have that conversation?
Yes.
How do you not join in? And how do you not get distracted in these stupid open plan offices?
It is. There's three culprits associated with lack of productivity, which does have a bottom line impact on business. This is a couple of years ago, but Gallup estimated that that lack of productivity costs businesses as much as $350 billion in the U.S. And Ernst & Young did a similar study here in New Zealand, and that cost was at about $30 billion. It takes a while when you're interrupted. You're likely to be interrupted 56 times on an average day at work. 3 minutes is the average attention span on a task before the next interruption happens. And then you can spend up to 2 hours every day trying to refocus after an interruption.
It's a lie when people say, I just want a minute of your time. Don't lie to me. You want half an hour.
That's right.
Honestly.
A minute. Do you have a minute? It usually translates into about 30 minutes or so.
It's at their convenience too, right? They're walking past, you're still tippity-tappeting out, emails and spreadsheets. And
It's difficult. We talked a few weeks back about the rise in workplace flexibility, that now is the number one determinant in whether a person, men and women, used to be 20 years ago, you would think about it as women taking advantage more of the workplace flex arrangements, but now it is as important to men in the sense of you got to give me a little bit more flex in terms of where I work, the hours I work, how I work, because the open space plan in some cases really works against productivity.
it does. Hey, I want to whip on through to the next topic, which I know will affect most people who work in any form of an office environment. Endless stupid meetings. How do you avoid them?
Yes. There was a famous video called Bloody Meetings.
Oh, really?
About a decade or so ago. And it's one of those things where they're inevitable. We have to meet. There's a sense that 10 years from now, meetings are going to be different. Because
Thank
of
God.
the whole workplace flex thing, the notion that we're all going to be under one roof, sitting in the same room or in the same office for 8 hours so meetings will happen more virtually. But they're inevitable. We have to have them happen. But sometimes, here, these stats are from Atlassian's research. Most employees attend around 65 meetings every month. 65.
What?
Half of these meetings are considered time wasted. That's 33 hours spent in unproductive meetings every month. Listen to this one, Roman. 91% of us daydream in meetings, while 39% occasionally doze off into a real sleep.
That's quite a skill to keep your head upright while you're sleeping.
It is. 73% of us do other work in meetings. 45% feel overwhelmed by the number of meetings. And 47% of people believe that meetings are the number one time waster in their day.
I'm not surprised.
Isn't that something?
It is indeed. Harold Hillman, he's an executive coach. He's with the Sigmoid Curve Consulting Group. If I wanted to get in touch with you to get my life back on track, how would I do that?
I'm at www.sigmoidcurve.com.
Always lovely of you to pop in. I really appreciate your time on the Sunday Cafe, Harold.
Good to see you, Roman.
Yeah, you too.